A man who died 2,400 years ago understood your dissatisfaction better than most therapists alive today. Not because he was a genius, because he asked a question that modern science spent 2,000 years trying to answer, and kept arriving at the same place he did. What if happiness has nothing to do with feeling good? In 1938, Harvard University launched the longest-running study of human happiness ever conducted. They followed hundreds of people across 8 decades. Their money, their careers, their bodies, their relationships, everything. When the results came in, the study's director stood on a stage and delivered the conclusion in one sentence. It was the same truth Aristotle had written in Athens 350 BC. In the next 10 minutes, I'm going to show you what they both discovered, why almost no one acts on it, and why the life most of us are optimizing for may be designed to fail. The ancient Greeks had 2 words for happiness. The difference between them is one of the most important distinctions in the history of philosophy, and almost no one knows it. The first word was hedone. This is where we get hedonism. It means pleasure. The feeling you get when something goes your way, when you're comfortable, when you get what you wanted. It arrives fast, it feels good, and then it ends. The second word was eudaimonia. There's no clean English translation. Flourishing comes closest, but it doesn't mean feeling good. It means living well, using yourself fully, becoming the person you're capable of being. Aristotle's argument in the Nicomachean ethics was this: if you build your life around hedone, you will spend your entire life running. Because pleasure is temporary by design. It arrives, peaks, and fades. And the moment it fades, you need more. Eudaimonia doesn't work that way. It doesn't disappear when you stop thinking about it. It accumulates, like compound interest, invisible for a long time, then impossible to ignore. He wrote this in 350 BC. Most people have never read it, and most people are living exactly the life he described as the trap. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. In 1971, 2 psychologists named Philip Brickman and Donald Campbell introduced a concept they called the Hedonic Treadmill. The idea was simple. Human beings adapt to almost everything. Your brain has a baseline level of happiness, and no matter what happens to you, it tends to drift back toward that baseline. Good fortune, bad fortune, doesn't matter. The treadmill resets. 7 years later, Brickman wanted to test how far this adaptation actually goes. So he tracked 2 groups of people, 22 people who had recently won the lottery, 29 people who had suffered serious accidents and were now paralyzed. The prediction was obvious. Lottery winners should be dramatically happier. Paralyzed people should be dramatically less happy. That's what common sense says. Neither group matched the prediction. Lottery winners were not significantly happier than ordinary people in a control group. In fact, they reported taking less pleasure in everyday activities, a good conversation, a meal, a sunny afternoon, because everything routine had become dull compared to the high of winning. The paralyzed group reported happiness levels far higher than anyone outside the study expected. They had adapted, rebuilt their baseline, found meaning in smaller things. This is why the raise that was supposed to fix everything stopped feeling like much by month 3. Why the apartment you saved for felt completely normal within a year. Why the vacation you planned for 6 months became ordinary by day 4. Your brain isn't broken. It's doing exactly what it evolved to do: adapt, reset, push you toward wanting more. The problem is you built an entire life around winning a game your brain is designed to restart. Aristotle saw this coming 2,400 years ago. He didn't have neuroscience, he just had observation. He called it mistaking pleasure for happiness. He said it was the central error a human being could make. But his alternative, eudaimonia, doesn't feel like what we think happiness is supposed to feel like, and that's the part nobody tells you. Think about the last time you felt genuinely satisfied, not excited, not entertained, satisfied. It probably wasn't a day when things were easy. It wasn't the afternoon you finished a show or the evening you stayed on the couch. It was probably a day when you made something difficult, when you helped someone in a way that cost you something, when you were so deep in the middle of something that you forgot to check your phone. Aristotle had a name for what you felt in that moment. He called it the activity of the soul in accordance with excellence, which sounds like philosophy homework. So here's the translation. You were using yourself fully, not watching life, participating in it. That's eudaimonia. And Aristotle said it comes from three things. First, developing and using your capabilities, not consuming, building, struggling with something that demands more from you than you currently have. Second, the depth of your relationships, not how many people you know, how well the few who matter actually know you. Aristotle wrote that a person without genuine friendship is missing something fundamental, regardless of everything else they have. Third, contribution, living for something that doesn't begin and end with how you feel today. Now here's something most people get wrong about Aristotle. He wasn't saying external circumstances don't matter. He wasn't a Stoic. He believed that basic health, some material stability, and decent circumstances were real preconditions for flourishing. Not the goal, but the floor. What he was saying is this: treating those preconditions as the finish line is the error. Most of us are working our entire lives toward conditions that Aristotle would have called prerequisites, and we're calling that happiness. None of these things feel good while you're building them. They produce something slower, heavier, the kind of weight that feels like it belongs there. And 2,000 years later, science finally built the tools to measure what Aristotle already had a word for. In 2015, Robert Waldinger, the director of the Harvard Study of Adult Development, gave a TED Talk that has since been viewed over 40 million times. He was describing 8 decades of data, hundreds of participants, more information on human happiness than any study ever conducted. He delivered the conclusion in one sentence. The clearest message we get from this 75-year study is this: good relationships keep us happier and healthier. Period. Not money, not achievement, not status, not anything you can acquire. The researchers found that the quality of a person's close relationships at age 50 was a better predictor of their physical health at age 80 than their cholesterol levels at 50. Read that again. How you treated the people closest to you at 50 predicted what your body would look like at 80, more accurately than a medical test. That's Aristotle's second source, confirmed by 8 decades of data. Around the same period, researcher Sonja Lyubomirsky and her colleagues published influential findings suggesting that a significant portion of long-term happiness is shaped not by what happens to us, but by how we choose to live. Our intentional daily choices and behaviors. The exact figures have since been refined and debated as the science evolved, but the core direction has held across subsequent research. What we actively choose to do with our time matters far more to our happiness than most of us act like it does. And that portion, whatever its precise size, maps almost exactly onto what Aristotle called eudaimonia. The choice to develop yourself, the choice to build real relationships, the choice to contribute to something beyond your own comfort. Martin Seligman, one of the founders of positive psychology, later formalized this into a framework called PERMA: positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishment. 3 of the 5, engagement, relationships, meaning, are precisely what Aristotle named in 350 BC, the same list, 2,400 years apart. At some point, you have to stop calling it a coincidence. But knowing all of this isn't the hard part. The hard part is something else entirely. If the science is this consistent, if this many researchers over this many decades keep arriving at the same answer, why aren't we living it? Think about the last time you meant to call someone who matters to you and didn't, not because something urgent came up, because you were tired, because you told yourself you'd do it tomorrow, because you kept scrolling. The Harvard study says that person is one of your most important long-term investments in your health, your happiness, your longevity. And you chose a screen instead. That's not a character flaw. It's a mismatch of incentives. Scrolling delivers a small reward immediately. A real conversation, one where someone actually knows you, where you have to be present and honest and sometimes uncomfortable, delivers a much larger reward later in ways that are nearly invisible in the moment. Every platform you use is engineered to win that competition. There are entire buildings of engineers and behavioral scientists whose only job is to make the short version of happiness more accessible and more frictionless than the long version. And they are extraordinarily good at their work. The result, a generation more entertained than any in history, and more dissatisfied than most. Aristotle called this mistaking pleasure for happiness. He said it was the central error a human being could make. He just couldn't have imagined how many tools we would eventually build to help us make it faster, at scale, personalized, available every hour of the day in our pockets. The Harvard study ran for over 80 years. Aristotle wrote the Nicomachean Ethics 2,400 years ago. They arrived at the same truth, not the same words, but the same answer. That the version of happiness most of us are chasing is built to reset, that the one that doesn't reset isn't something you feel. It's something you build, slowly, through 1,000 small choices to do the harder thing instead of the easier one. It doesn't feel like happiness while you're building it. It feels like effort, like showing up when you're tired, like choosing the difficult conversation over the comfortable silence, like staying present when everything in your environment is designed to pull you away. But it's the only version that compounds, the only version that doesn't disappear when the feeling fades. Before you close this, sit with one question. Think of a specific person, not a category of relationship, a specific person that you've been treating as if they'll always be there. Someone who deserves more of your time than they're getting right now. You already know who it is. Their name came to you before I finished that sentence. The question isn't whether you know what to do. The question is whether today will be different from yesterday. If this made you see happiness differently, follow. Every week I go deep on psychology, behavior, and the gap between what we know and how we actually live.